Welcome to this segment of the conference today, which I'm actually very excited to be chairing. I'm also a little bit intimidated by my panel. In colloquial terms, we say this is a panel of bigwigs. And I would like to encourage all of you, when the time comes, to, as Russell said a little earlier, to engage, question, and dig in. Ask the questions you want to ask now in this forum where we can all hear the answers and gain as much as possible from the interaction. Now, I'm going to introduce the panelists in a moment, but before I do that, I want to talk about how we would like this panel to develop. We're going to have a conversation among ourselves, and you will listen very attentively, as you always do when you come to Business BVI. But when we're halfway through or just a little bit past halfway, we want to start engaging you as part of the conversation so that you can ask more questions and we can maximize what Russell wanted to call the muscularity of this panel. Lorna didn't quite think that described her, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. So on the panel this morning, we have, and of course, I'm starting right here on my left, is Mrs. Lorna Smith, OBE, who I won't describe because we all know her. But suffice it to say, I think of her as the knowledge when it comes to the financial services sector in the BVI. She has immense experience in this field from lots of different angles, and we're very privileged to have her here. Full resume details are in the conference materials, and I invite you to take a look at those. We also have, going across to my left, is Mr. John Beachy, who is making, I would think, his inaugural Business BVI appearance. He's very recently appointed as the chairman of the BVI International Arbitration Center. Also a very interesting gentleman to meet and to know, and certainly when it comes to arbitration has an amazing wealth of experience that the BVI is very privileged to be able to tap into at this point in time in history. And sitting next to him is GERARD, FARARA, Queen's Counsel. Again, a very difficult man to describe in a short period of time, but we all know him as having a very long and distinguished career in the legal profession. We know that he's currently sitting as a judge in the commercial court here in the BVI. And he's also one of those people who has given an immeasurable amount of time and effort to public service in the Virgin Islands and has dealt with a lot of thorny issues, including our constitutional review some years ago. And now he has played an integral part in the events surrounding the McKinsey study, and he has quite a big job to play, a big role to play, and he's already done quite a bit in one key area, and we're going to talk about that later, that area being labor and immigration, which we all like to hear about. Now, moving to my right is Mr. Chad Home, who is described as the strategic advisor of financial services.
I think that's all.
Yeah, strategic advisor of financial services. He's actually better described as a member of a team of persons evaluating a BVI-based financial services opportunity. And I'm going to let him talk more about that in the panel after this one, or in the session after this one. But there's a little mystery to Mr. Holmes, and we'll learn more about that. And Greg Boyd, who many of you probably know very well. Greg has been with us here in the BVI now for about 10 years.
That's correct.
And he's a partner at HARNEYS. And we will hear what Greg has to say on some very key points when we get to that. So moving ahead, again, when it's your turn, engage, dig in, question. This is the panel who has all the answers to everything financial services, apart from Simon Filmer, okay? Okay. Lorna, let me start with you. and the McKinsey study. We've already heard quite a good synopsis from the Premier earlier on, but I'm going to put you to round that out. Why did we need McKinsey, and what did McKinsey recommend that we do?
Thank you, Dawn. Good morning, everybody. I am certainly pleased with the mix of persons who are here. And I'm saying that in the context of the McKinsey study because we have both public sector and private sector persons here. A lot of work had been going on in financial services in terms of how do we take financial services to the next level. And that work was ongoing for about a year or two. And then we thought that we needed a group to pull it all together and to tell us really how to go to the next level. And McKinsey is McKinsey. I mean, they are the global, the best known consultants, the best consultants to do this kind of work. And so they were engaged to assist us to, oh my goodness, is this? That scared me. They were, is it too loud?
No, that's good.
No? Okay, it's a little bit of an echo. They were engaged to work with us to do just that. And what was important about the McKinsey study is it was not something that was helicoptered in. The study, the recommendations that some of you heard about this morning, those recommendations came out of meetings with the industry, with all of the stakeholders, the public sector and the private sector. And that is why I said that I'm glad to see the mix of persons here today, because the two have to work together in order for those recommendations to be properly implemented. The Premier and Russell talked quite a bit about those recommendations. I'm not going to repeat them, except to add a few of them that were not touched on. And I think that one of them was more value-added services and business development that we have put together. An example of value-added services and business development would be what Chad is going to talk about in terms of secondary service providers bringing new business to the BVI. And I too will not steal his thunder and leave the mystery man a little longer. But that is a fine example, bringing more value, more substance to the British Virgin Islands. I think the Premier talked about engaging the population, but he did not talk about, I don't think he talked about strengthening Virgin Islander capability. This is very crucial, and it's going to be done through the Financial Services Institute, partly an institution that has been around for a number of years, but that has to be strengthened substantially. And we are in the process of doing that. Of course, it also has to be done with private sector cooperation in terms of scholarships, attachments, and so on, in order to ensure that British Virgin Islanders become very much engaged and optimally engaged in our financial services. All this in terms of what McKinsey recommended, in terms of what we are doing, is to ensure that we remain a world leader in our core business, which Simon and others talked about this morning, to build on that in short.
Well, thank you very much, Lorna. Jerry, you have been around a while. And you've had or maybe I was going to rephrase it, but that wasn't getting any better. I was going to say he's been around quite a bit. That doesn't sound much better. But certainly you've seen several crucial points in the history of the BVI, and you've been involved at those key points as well. What do you think of the timing of the McKinsey study and the recommendations that they have put forward? Do you think they're relevant? Are they going to work for us? What do you think?
I suppose I should start by saying thank you, Dawn. I used to remember when I was the youngest person doing most things in the BVI, but Dr. Pickering, that has changed apparently. It seems to be the cycle of life. First of all, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here at this conference. The McKinsey report, I think, came at an important juncture in the history of the British Virgin Islands. It might be argued that the whole initiative perhaps should have come a bit earlier, but some things don't happen until the fullness of time. The entire initiative, I think, was one which came at a time when the BVI, to some extent, was and perhaps is at what people describe as a crossroad. That is to say, we had very much the glory days in financial services, in which we had the proper legislation, and we had a jurisdiction which became very attractive and was used considerably, particularly in the area of company incorporations. There were several attempts at further diversification of the products which we offered here in the BVI, and with varying degrees of success. On the world front, there were significant changes taking place in the regulatory area and in other areas which had a serious impact or a significant impact on the industry here in the British Virgin Islands. And so it was indeed important, and some would say even crucial, for us to take a very in-depth look at the industry, how it is developed, and where we need to take it, hopefully take it in the future, in order to sustain the industry and also to further develop the industry and its importance to the economy of the British Virgin Islands. As we've heard before, financial services contributes 60 cents of every dollar to the economy, and that means that it cannot be ignored. But in speaking of ignoring, we also cannot ignore the other sectors of the economy. And so while we speak in terms of the McKinsey report, we speak mainly in relation to financial services. It must not be forgotten that there are several other key sectors of the economy, and a number of the initiatives recommended in the McKinsey report are not confined purely to financial services, but cut across other sectors of the economy. Of course, one such recommendation and initiative is reforms to our labor and immigration policies, regulations, and laws. So really, to answer your question directly, Dawn, I think this initiative came at a very important stage in the development of the country, and I hope that it will play a very key role in chartering and crafting the course of the territory into the future. And that certainly is the intention. Mm-hmm. I know Simon said that we must be brave, and he has very kindly given us some feedback from another jurisdiction where McKinsey did a similar exercise. I'm not sure how they conducted the exercise there, but the way in which this exercise was conducted here in the BVI, it was heavily weighted on local industry input, and I think that is very, very important. So a lot of the recommendations that are in that report have really come out of the participation and the recommendations of persons here in the key industries and sectors of the economy. And that is important because these are persons who have had the experience, institutionally and otherwise, in their own spheres of operation within the economy. And also, they are very knowledgeable about what is happening on the world scene and where we are likely to go in terms of financial services as an industry worldwide. And we've heard a lot about that in the oil report today, which I think was very, very helpful and very educational. So yes, I think it's an important initiative. And the fact that also the question of implementation is crucial. And one of the recommendations, of course, is that you have a dedicated unit to implementation, something which was lacking in the past. There were several recommendations in the past, some of which were certainly worthy of implementation, but there was no dedicated unit responsible for implementation. And I think we are getting our act together now as it relates to that unit, and hopefully we'll begin to see some results and some changes.
Well, yes, we understand that Mr. Malone has 18 months to get that all together and effective. So thank you very much, Jerry. The title of our panel is Beyond McKinsey. So you've had McKinsey, and I think we now want to look into the future, and we want to talk about Mr. Malone does what he's supposed to do within 18 months, and everybody cooperates with him. Where are we going from there, 5 to 10 years from now? What will the BVI look financial services wise? Chad, I understand that you are an American.
Correct.
And that's
That's fine. Don't hold it against me.
And you live in Asia.
Live in Asia, in Hong Kong, yes.
And you have a particular fondness for the Virgin Islands.
Certainly. This is one of the first places that I came vacationing in the Caribbean. And so it is a little different to come in a suit and tie and address an audience like this. But yes, all of the islands, whether it be dropping off at the Soggy Dollar, sort of the feet in the sand in Virgin Gorda, so it's near and dear place to me. So I'm obviously privileged to come back here for this forum, and a little bit later to speak on, I think will be a very interesting topic. And
they can't hear.
Can't hear? Huh?
No, the back can't hear.
Can't hear. Oh.
I think our technician is going to work magic.
Technician? Hello? In the back? Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to hold it apparently.
All right, let me.
Okay. Right. So now, in terms of business,
Yeah.
you're living in Asia, and the BVI is obviously a jurisdiction that you hear about. And earlier we spoke about our brand and our reputation and so on. And looking into the future, and we've heard from Simon about brand recognition for the BVI in Asia and the use of BVI products and so on. 5 to 10 years down the road, what do you foresee for the BVI brand? Are we still going to be relevant? Yeah, Simon's predictions correct? What do you think?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that the BVI will continue to be relevant. Okay, that's fine.
They can't hear you either.
It's on.
She needs one.
You know,
She needs one.
Okay.
Go on.
today you have roughly 450,000, close to 500,000 incorporated business companies in the BVI. The percentage of those that relate somehow to China or Asia is over 50 to 60%. Obviously, we can all look at the growth in Asia, which is far superior to any other parts of the world. And Asians continue to use BCs to conduct business, particularly the Chinese. There's almost a sense, I think, in Asia, of a sense of accomplishment for entrepreneurs to actually own BCs. They've made it to some extent. I think that there are obviously a host of issues that we all face, many of those which Simon talked about this year and have been highlighted in last year. But one of the things that, and I'm going to address this in another hour, one of the things I think that is critical is just to have new, innovative entities, structures come into the BVI to help address some of the fundamental issues that are plaguing the incorporations and the other parts of financial services. One of those that we'll get to, and a couple of issues Simon spoke to, which is the opening of bank accounts. If these incorporated entities here cannot operate efficiently, move money around the world in the form of or through their entities as opposed to doing it through their individual capacity, they will find other jurisdictions to incorporate to the detriment of the BVI. So that is obviously critical, something I'll address in a little while. I think that obviously one of the other key elements of the BVI is rule of law, the ability for entities that are set up here to have degrees of protection, whether that's in the form of a creditor or a debtor protection. When something happens, they need to understand that there's a sense of stability, that outcomes are to some extent known, and that level of stability should continue to help the BVI in that regard. And I think that there's other major prospects for the BVI. There are opportunities to diversify financial services, to move beyond the incorporation business, to start to look to businesses that have traditionally been in the Cayman and Bermuda, largely capital markets related business, some insurance related businesses. And I say that because those have historically been markets for US and UK related entities. One of the great benefits that the BVI has is this close relationship with China. And because of its close relationship with China, has this unique opportunity as China's markets develop to become really the center here in the Caribbean for the Chinese-related capital markets and other businesses.
I'll take this. Greg, before coming to the BVI, you did spend quite a number of years in London. And I believe you do quite a bit of work in non-Asian markets. Can you tell us about the BVI brand in those sectors and how that operates in your line of work, and what your predictions for the future would be in your line of work, provided we do things right?
Thank you, Dawn. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I think to begin the answer to that one, I'd like to imprint 3 words on everyone's mind here today, and that is energy, innovation, and agility. I think part of every solution is recognizing, firstly, that there's a problem, and identifying that and seeing what you need to do to get towards your end result. Chad has mentioned that China has been hugely instrumental in the development and success of the BVI financial services. I haven't been around as long as Jerry, but certainly the creators of this genius product that we have today, being the BVI Financial Services and the BVI Business Company, encompassed all of that. They had energy, they were innovative, and they moved with agility to spot a market gap and provide a solution that worked. And I think if you speak to any of the people who were involved with that, it worked far beyond their wildest dreams. Some of that might have been attributable to luck. A lot of it was also attributable to providing a very relevant and useful product at the time. With success, or with significant success, and you see this in the business world all the time, there's a tendency for complacency to creep in as well. When things are going very, very well, you don't have to work too hard, and you don't actually have to be too innovative to create new business opportunities. I think the crossroads that everyone has mentioned that we came to is that we did see that success was diminishing, and the product was slowly starting to slide downwards in terms of market share. There were also obviously the pressures from the OECD and various other blacklistings, which thanks to those people that were mentioned earlier today, including the Premier, we've managed to clear up, and it's essential that we actually stay on whatever you want to call these things, white lists or compliant jurisdiction lists. So the next frontier, for me, I think we definitely need to consider and look at Africa. The legacy of the BVI has now become that we are the premier offshore corporate domicile. We've got nearly 500,000 active companies. What do those companies do? What are they up to? Foreign direct investment is very, very key to what we do. In summary, foreign direct investment is simply one company in one jurisdiction investing in another company or project in another jurisdiction. The BVI in 2013 attracted $92 billion in foreign direct investment. Now, that didn't go into projects necessarily in the BVI, of course. Most of that was channeled elsewhere in the world to develop projects and infrastructure in emerging markets and even in the developed world. As such, we're a conduit for foreign direct investment. We channel it and we deploy global capital for major projects around the world. Why are they using a BVI company? Because of the corporate advantage. We can structure joint ventures brilliantly. We can create robust corporate structures. Why is that important? Any investor is going to do a risk profile assessment. It can be geographic, it can be political, it can be economic. It's also going to be corporate. We can mitigate the corporate risk through the BVI's progressive corporate laws and the structures that we are able to provide in that space. And like everything, projects, there will be bumps in the road. We have some of the best litigators around when it comes to shareholding disputes and resolving those disputes. Some of the biggest shareholder disputes have been heard by our courts. We've got the experience, we've got the expertise, and we're backed up by very, very strong precedent. That goes all the way to the UK Privy Council. So investors are getting certainty. They know that a dispute can be resolved quickly and efficiently. What does that mean to a project? Any project that lies idle for longer than sort of 9 to 12 months, chances are it's going to fail. If we can sort out the dispute very, very quickly, and building on this, we're going to have arbitration as well as a means of dispute resolution. That means projects get back on track. That promotes project viability. So not only are we good at deploying capital and protecting the investment, but we're also good at promoting the viability of the project, because if things do go south, we can sort them out properly. And the commercial court, in that extent, has also got unlimited relief when it comes to well-structured joint ventures. And that's very different to other jurisdictions. And these are the competitive angles that we are not promoting and putting out in that space. We read all the rhetoric all the time about being a tax haven and this, that, the next thing that goes on. Yeah, it helps politicians, it sells newspapers, but it's not the truth. What we are is we are a provider of corporate solutions. And obviously I'm limiting that to myself as a corporate lawyer and what I do in the corporate space. But I think that is a drum that we can really bang very, very loudly, and we can certainly state that we do that better than pretty much any other offshore jurisdiction.
So are you basically optimistic then about the growth of that type of business, the type of work that you're doing, and the use of BVI structures accordingly?
I certainly am, and I think a lot of it is happening already, but we need to promote that. I was at the FDI forum in London last September, and it was interesting. Jersey Finance were there, and they were simply stating that they are the optimum jurisdiction for inbound investment into Africa, which is quite amusing, because if you look at a pie chart of foreign direct investment and where the conduits flow, as I mentioned, the BVI's 92 billion was attracted in 2013. About 87 billion of that was deployed around the globe. To put that in context, that's the fourth largest in the world, and that's including all economies. America was 159 billion, and we were larger than China, rather larger than India and Brazil combined. So we're a major player in that market, but no one really knows that. And I think, quite frankly, quite a lot of professionals who are actually working in the financial services industry in the BVI are maybe not necessarily aware of that statistic and the importance that we play in that space.
We have to do a lot better at promoting the substance of what we actually do here in BVI past incorporation.
Absolutely. Once we pass the incorporation phase, and the magic about the BVI company is it can be used by a startup or an entrepreneur, and 10 years later it can be listed on the New York Stock Exchange. We can adapt the company to the required level of corporate governance and business requirement, relevant to that company's business. So yeah, it is something that is going to be a promotional exercise and certainly a relationship building exercise.
Okay, thank you. I think that's something that Simon would say that we got right. the BVI Business Company. Now, John, I want to come on to you. When Greg was speaking, he spoke about the importance of being able to settle disputes efficiently when you're dealing with commercial matters. And you have been given perhaps an enviable task to make arbitration happen for the BVI. I think that's probably the most direct way to put it, and to oversee that process. 5 to 10 years down the road, where should the BVI be in terms of arbitration, and what among the recommendations that you've been hearing about would be essential to that picture that you're going to paint for us?
Good morning. Let me start with what may seem a diversion. I've spent the last 6.5, 7 years of my life going to conferences where the sole topic of conversation has been arbitration, arbitration, arbitration. And one of the few releases in terms of reading materials from the sort of dross that I normally have to deal with comes in the form of the comic novels of a gentleman called P.G. Wodehouse. One of whose greatest creations was a bevy of dragon aunts whose sole purpose in life was to make life absolutely miserable for their nephews. And in one of the last books he wrote, a particular dragon of an aunt was confronted with somebody whom she didn't much like in the person of her brother. And she was asked to give some leeway to a nephew. She said, "No law, human or divine, requires an aunt to love a nephew whose sole topic of conversation is the sale of dog biscuits." And I feel much the same way when I'm asked to talk about arbitration after a while. But this was a conference which attracted me because it looked at the thing in the round. And this was not arbitration for its own sake, but arbitration as a product, and let's use nasty salesman language for it, a product which the BVI could add to those which it already has, and use its own brand name and recognition for that which it does well, to add an ability to offer a center for the resolution of international disputes. Now, you have most of the business here being international. You've heard a great deal about the extent to which business comes now from China. To a certain extent, the court system here is able to deal with disputes that are referred here because they're contracts under BVI law. But they can do a great deal, and they do it on the whole pretty well. What they have done, and this is invaluable, is to develop a reputation for being fair, independent, and subject to scrutiny when it's necessary to be subject to scrutiny by courts which are equally well regarded as being fair and independent. That is something never to lose, because with it comes a reputation of a jurisdiction as enjoying both a stable political background and a secure and supportive judiciary. For an arbitration centre, those are, again, invaluable assets with which to begin life, because we can set up here and say that to the extent we need to refer matters to the court or seek the support of the courts, we have the support of courts which are aware of what arbitration does and will deal with any matters referred to them on a ground of utter impartiality and independence. For international businessmen, the same sort of issues are critical as those which are critical to them in other spheres of their activities. We've heard about them. They need to know that they have certainty. Well, stable government, decent courts, that's a good start. They need to know that if they bring a dispute to an arbitral centre, which is set up in the BVI, then it is a centre which will have a very high level of competence in its administration of disputes, that it will be able to create panels of arbitrators who are both renowned and competent and of people of great independence and integrity. And generally speaking, they will have a comfort zone which they will say to themselves, can we acquire this somewhere else? And of course, the answer for a nascent institution is, yes, of course they can. They can go to a number of institutions around the world which have very long reputations. But it does seem to me that what has been thought about here, and it's relevant again to some of the things that McKinsey have raised, and I want to come back to them in a moment, this is an opportunity for this place to set up a center which will be unique in the Caribbean. It will be able to access open markets from Latin America as well as from Europe and indeed from China. And China is actually quite important in all this because China has long had access to common law justice through Hong Kong, and it has been seen to work. And it's quite interesting to note the number of cases where China-related disputes come to Hong Kong and are enforced on the mainland of China by reason of the bilateral treaty arrangements between Hong Kong as a special administrative region and the mainland. But the Chinese mainland recognizes what is done in common law arbitrations in Hong Kong. If you're dealing with Chinese businesses which are looking to resolve disputes, and they're not looking to go to Hong Kong, but they want something which is relevant to them, and they know the BVI already, then you have the beginnings of a marketplace for a BVI arbitration center. Now, McKinsey raised two particular issues which seem to be critical, and they've clearly relevant to other sectors. First is ease of access, and to which, if I can be frivolous for the moment, they might have added the problem of getting here, although the Premier's announcement this morning has clearly gone a long way to helping there. But ease of access means, in the broadest sense, parties coming to arbitrate here want to know that they can use their advisors of choice. There will be no restrictions on their ability themselves to get here, that their witnesses will be able to get in, their experts will be able to get in. And as I say, whether they use a mix of external advisors or advisors local to the BVI, there will be no issue about that. But in that, of course, comes the tension. And that is this business of capacity building. Now, the legal sector here is a very sophisticated one. And one of the key concerns that the board of the International Arbitration Center has is to ensure that it works with the local legal community, to ensure that to the extent they add real value to what is being done in the center, that is harnessed to the fullest degree, and that the center in itself becomes a base from which it's possible to train younger members of the legal profession in what it means to be an international arbitrator, and to use the fact you've got people coming from other parts of the Caribbean, from Latin America, from common law jurisdictions further afield, who can bring with it an ability to show people how it's done, and occasionally to use administrative secretaries, which hopefully will come from the local legal pool here. Then it seems to me one can overcome some of the difficulties which are otherwise going to arise. And let me raise a point which I know is controversial, but it needs to be raised. There has been, because I've been on the wrong end of it, an enormous amount of feedback, particularly in London, against some of the provisions of the Legal Practicing Act. The LPA is a major issue. Now, in a sense, it's something which becomes almost parochial, because it affects largely, with great respect to the Chancery Bar in London and the courts here. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that lawyers are gossips. They have legal magazines which are immensely gossipy. And you may think you've got a nice little local problem here, but you believe me, it is all the way around the globe. And any last thing which can be used as a means to get a competitive advantage over something which is seen to be going here will be deployed. So it is absolutely critical that you say very clearly that so far as the arbitration center is concerned, work that goes on there is open to anyone who has a proper and legitimate reason to bring it here. No strings, no bars. And to give you an idea, I'm thinking perhaps in 5 years' time, if I'm allowed to carry on working with it that long and not thrown out in the meantime, I'd like to think that in 4 to 5 years' time, under the sort of leadership that I hope that we now have put in place, you'll be looking at maybe 30 or 40 cases a year. You would say that's not very many. It's actually quite a lot if you're looking at it as a regular stream of business. But let me give you something to aim for further afield than that. When I was running the ICC in Paris, the court there was a suggestion from the chairmanship of ICC, which comprised very serious businessmen who didn't understand arbitration at all, that perhaps we should move the whole thing, lock, stock and barrel, away from Paris, take it to Geneva, take it to Vienna. And the initial reaction from the French government was, fine, so it goes, yeah, so what? Well, then eventually we got a report organized, which was undertaken by two very senior inspecteurs de finance, so very closely connected to the French government. And to their own astonishment, they discovered that the mere fact that the ICC International Court of Arbitration was in Paris was probably worth something like 200 to 300 million euros a year to the Paris economy in terms of spin-offs for hotels, business services, everything else that goes with it. So, if I may say so, in the presence of the Premier, the government's ambitions for what it is creating here are very realistic. It is not spending a fortune, it's spending a sensible sum of money to build a centre which will do the job as it's required to do. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is no longer simply something on paper. The premises are there. There is an entire floor of a building not very far from here which is going to be kitted out to serve as hearing rooms and to have public space, which, for example, if it came to it, could be used for a courtroom if there's a lack of space elsewhere in town, which I know is an issue. The offices of the Secretariat of the Centre will be located away from that public space, so there's no question of confidentiality being in any shape or form compromised. It's there, and I would hope that by certainly September, October of this year, it will be fitted out, ready and open for business. So, whereas most nascent arbitration centres kick off with a wing and a prayer, this place kicks off with real premises, real support, and a real determination among those of us responsible for seeing it on its way to offer a service which will be high quality and a leader, certainly a leader in the Caribbean, and I think probably eventually rather larger, further afield. We've got some pretty good markers. We've got Hong Kong, we've got Singapore, but if they can do it, then I think with the sort of will that's been shown here, we can do the same. But it needs the support of the local legal community. They need to understand this is something that is complementary to what is offered here. It's not in any sense inimical to their interests. It's something they can support and grow with. And I hope that's a message in 3 or 4 years' time we can say we fulfilled.
Thank you very much, John.